Welcome back to the Sika Strength News Show. As always, brought to you by the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android in the link below. Today, we're looking at a clip that went pretty prolific in terms of the weightlifting community, but also was something that's very popular because Zlatan Ibrahimovic is just a very popular individual, of course. He is a very famous soccer player, as we call him in Ireland, because we have a different sport in Ireland, and it's called Gaelic football, so that's why we inherently use soccer. If that annoys you, please don't ever watch our videos ever again. Sometimes during this video, we might call it soccer and football. But anyway, in this clip, we've got a couple of exercises from Zlatan. He does 120 kilo clean and jerks, 135 kilo power clean and front squat, and then a rack jerk with like 130 kilos. Now, Zlatan is a retired professional footballer or soccer player. He's 44 years old. And this clip sparked quite a bit of a debate in the office the other day when we were starting looking at this. As so often does, it might sound like people to the outside that Darren and I are actually arguing with each other very aggressively. There's name calling, there's abuse, someone's getting called dumb. But in reality, it's just how we kind of parse through what we think about a certain situation. They eventually boil down to what I was saying is the fact that, okay, this particular clip shows in some way, or it highlights a fact in some way, just how poor the strength standards are in strength and conditioning for professional soccer players. Not because what Zlatan is doing here is poor. It's actually incredibly impressive. These are fantastic weights. But it highlighted just how strong he is here compared to probably pretty much any other professional soccer player. And we got into the debate basically saying that I feel like there's a lot of ground that could be made up for a sport that has possibly the most participation of any sport in the world. It is probably the most popular sport worldwide. It has almost certainly the most number of academies, scouts, coaches, and systems to go through. And it probably has the highest selection for parsing through talent. But then, in my opinion, and what we've seen to be true over a huge number of sports, and what tons of other great coaches and S&C coaches have seen across different sports, is that I feel if we look at what the professional athletes do in soccer, a lot of time it's, what was the word used there?
Bullshit?
Oh, yeah, that was the word used, yeah. Now, however, Dara's saying bullshit, but he is actually...
I'm standing up for the bullshit here a
You're
little
kind of
bit.
starting, yeah. Give us your point of view.
So the crux of it comes down to the fact that different sports have different levels of physical demand and different levels of skill demand. And so when you look at soccer, I think a lot of us will watch soccer on TV and there's very few goals scored.
I won't.
Very few goals scored. People fall over when someone breathes on them too heavily. And they don't really see soccer for the level of athleticism they actually have. Like the level of speed, agility, absolute acceleration, and just ability to carry that on throughout an entire 90-minute game is unbelievably high in soccer, particularly when you consider the level of lower body dexterity that's actually needed, right? So they're sprinting as fast or faster than an NFL player, but they have a ball at their feet and they have to be very, very conscious of where their feet are going. If you imagine when you see some of the incredible feats you'll see in track and field, where you got big, really heavy training sessions where people are doing 10, 11, 12, 15 kilometer intervals in training, where that might be made up of 400 meter, 800 meter, 1K repeats. You get soccer players doing that 5 times per week, or at least 3 times per week between training on the field and games themselves. So the level of physical demand in soccer is very high, but because the skill element is so inherently important to the sport, we oftentimes don't see the level of kind of strength development or power development, or in honest terms, like musculature development that you would see in other sports. So it does come down to that kind of balance of where is the best investment of time. And I think that's where the disagreement was caused, was a big investment in strength training in some sports might be 4, 5, 6 times per week in the gym. A big investment for a soccer player is probably going to 3 sessions per week in the gym and putting a big focus on building those 5, 3, and 1 RMs. But most of them are going to really be focused on the actual skill element rather than the physical development element.
See, the problem, right, if you look at what professional soccer players do, and there's tons of videos out there online, and a lot of it is what I would call kiss me ass strength and conditioning work. It's stuff where they're doing single leg RDLs with water bags. They're doing sideline lunges and lateral jumps and stuff, all of which are actually probably useful in the right context and the right place, but they're not going to move the needle per se. So if we were to look at what we could confidently say, if someone said, okay, Owen, prove it, what would you do with soccer players, which we've helped several soccer players of middling level, across different countries. Not an absolute massive number here, but we've helped tons of different athletes across multiple different sports over the years of a variety of different levels. And what you'd be looking at here is there's a couple of things you could say confidently that would help physical attributes that are useful for soccer. The first one, and one of my biggest arguments for this here, is if they improve this, is the rate of injuries. So the highest rate of injuries in soccer or football are in match hours. Compared to training, they get injured way more. It seems to be 2 or 3 times the rate of injuries. Now, a lot of these are from contact injuries, which is obviously something, no matter how strong you are, can't be avoided. But a lot of these, in terms of, okay, you could probably reduce the magnitude of these contact injuries and the return to play time. You could also reduce those overuse and strain injuries, hamstrings, ACLs, similar things like that would almost certainly be improved by good range of motion strength training. There's an estimated cost, according to one research paper, that the soccer player at the highest level, when they're averaged, costs about £500,000 per month. So my argument would be that you could confidently say that you could even reduce those hours by a few weeks per year. You're arguably saving one of the most meaningful amounts of money across any sport. You're saving the most valuable amount of time. Other sports, you might look at something and it'll say, okay, that'll make a 2% difference. Say, let's just put a random number on it. You might be like, that's not worth that much. But in a game like soccer, where it's so valuable per club, the argument there would be, first of all, injuries would be massively improved, or significantly improved, I should say. Massively is probably the incorrect term I should use there. Then we've got things like acceleration off the line, which is important, change of direction, which is very important. And then a little bit of jostling goes on. I know, very rare with soccer, but no less important. Now, the crux of this here is that people hear strength conditioning coaches say this, and they're like, oh, okay, he's going to spend 5 weeks in the gym for 10 months of the year. I'm talking about, can they body weight back squat for 5 reps to a reasonable depth? I'm talking about, can they deadlift 120 kilos with reasonable form at least every so often? The standards I'm talking about here for strength training are so low that some might use the very triggering word pathetic, okay? They're things like,
Oh.
do you know what I mean? I'm being honest though.
Oh.
Realistically, the level of strength we're talking about here, for the people watching this,
Mhm.
would think it's absolutely abysmal. No
Yes.
offense, right? And I'm not saying they're great soccer players and I'm not saying they're great athletes, but just in terms of strength levels in comparison, and if we wanted to put some kind of reference on it, it might sound kind of slightly harsh, right? But I'm talking about something that they could achieve with 2 good sessions per week. Dare I say 3 sessions a week, 3 hours of their training in the off season would make a huge difference to this. And what I'd be really interested in seeing is if a high level team bought into this, because obviously when it comes to team sports, there's so many variables at play. You need to hit a critical mass of people doing this. So the more people are bought into this and the more of the system are bought into it, what would the outcome you'd see across those variables would something I would be very interested in. Because if you look at that, right, and they'll say, okay, show me an example of where you've done this. Say last year we helped Cameron McAvoy, one of the bigger examples from last year. He swam the fastest 50-meter freestyle at the World Championships where he won golds. We helped him in his off season. If you looked at his program, you could see that program in an over 40 strength conditioning at a CrossFit box, for example. It's squats, deep squats. He worked a lot on his mobility. He was obviously very tall as a swimmer. Weighted pull-ups, assistance exercises, assault bike. Just super straightforward. If I showed you that in Excel, you'd probably have a hard time being like, that was the off season for a gold medal, the fastest time in the world. If you weren't au fait with good S&C, you might be surprised with that. And 120 kilo clean and jerk, not a hope would I be worrying about that for those level of athletes. I'd be like, can we squat below parallel with 100 kilos for 4 or 5 reps? 90 kilos with a pair of weightlifting shoes on by the end of an off season. And I think they would see big differences. But the problem here is you need everyone to be bought into this. I think you'd need the whole team, the whole system to be like, right, I think this is something that's important for everyone, which just doesn't really happen, I suppose, is the crux of the situation.
Speaking of it really happening, a friend of the channel, excellent doctor of physiotherapy, Kelly Storrett, was involved with a Premiership soccer club about 10 or 15 years ago. He was in Arsenal, flown out there on a regularly kind of weekly, bi-weekly basis. One of the main keystones of his program he implemented in Arsenal was getting them to back squat once per week. And I think that shows like exactly what you're talking about here. We're not talking about massive training programs of really ramping people up and stacking a load of muscle on people. We're not talking about players pushing themselves incredibly hard in the in-season S&C pieces. It's just slightly more strength training than what you would see. One thing you have to consider with the soccer players, though, is it's not unfounded or it's not kind of misplaced optimism that they're going to be the genetic elite here. Soccer has one of the youngest ages of specialization across all of the popular professional sports we have. So by the time you're 6, 7, 8, you're kind of getting earmarked as a good player. By the time you're 10, 11, 12, you're in a professional structure. And then by the time you're 15, your career is over or you might make it. Like, you do not have that in most of the other professional team sports we see. You could get a rugby player who's realistically 17 or 18 when they're first playing rugby, and they're going to be able to become a professional athlete if they're a good enough athlete, if they're intelligent enough to learn the game, and if they have good coaches and a good structure around them. The exact same can be said for the NFL. You get people playing professional NFL who have never played American football before and play their first game of American football as a professional NFL athlete. Like, that would absolutely never happen in soccer because the skill level is so high. Owen mentioned something earlier about talent ID, right? And talent selection and the pool being so broad. And I think what's carrying it so much at the moment is because there are so many athletes playing, because that talent ID structure reaches so broadly. Like, you've probably all heard of people who got trials for a professional soccer team or whatever. That is so ingrained in all of the grassroots structure that what you're probably having is genetically, it is the people who are a bit hardier and the people who have that natural inclination towards a bit more strength and maybe don't need that same level of S&C to get them through their professional careers. You're probably just seeing that survivorship bias because that talent ID is so good and because that scouting network is so prolific. I think if the sport was less structured and they had less of that prolific network of able to identify talent at such a young age, you probably would see more of a need for the strength training.
As well, it's important to say is that sometimes innovation is not worthwhile. So every so often, every couple of years in weightlifting, we'll see a coach come along and they'll say they have a new way of programming weightlifting. They'll be like, I'm going to use bands and chains, or I'm going to use this power threshold testing, and we're going to use this functional part of training for weightlifting, and it's going to radically adjust for the average weightlifter. But in weightlifting, unfortunately, it comes down to what it always has. It's being strong, doing your snatch, clean and jerk, doing your pulls, having mobility. It's just sometimes that's what it is. That's the process. There's nuances for programming. Some coaches are better or worse than others, and that's the case. And an average soccer fan or football fan might look at this and be like, but it's perfect. Why would you want to change it any further? The argument there is that we're not pulling things out of our ass. There is very real physical traits that could be improved. Now, will we make a difference with it? I don't think so. Are we going to set our sights on that? I don't think so.
No.
There's other sports who want to improve. And there's obviously, look, there was a soccer player last week who was talking on the Sika Strength app, and he was asking what program would be best for him. And he started to name out his numbers, and he had like 100 kilo clean and 140 kilo back squat, which is well above. I would say that's within the 99 percentile of soccer players in terms of strength. So, if they come to us, we're happy to help. But it's something, there's a culture there. It's very interesting. I'd be interested to see if there's any high level soccer players who do a normal strength training, I want to call it, or more routine stuff like that. But nonetheless, very impressive lifting from Zlatan.
That's where I wanted to finish on this is these numbers. If you're a soccer fan, you don't have the direct comparison to make. These numbers are very, very legitimate for a person in their 40s who's in the mid 90 kilo range and is 6'6" or 6'7". Like, these are very legitimate numbers. There's some comments on some of these videos being like, you're a professional athlete, can't believe you're only lifting these numbers. And those people are just idiots. Like, these are very, very good numbers. This probably puts you at the point of being the strongest member in the gym if you're in most CrossFit gyms in the world.
Not only that, but this looks like exactly like any 120 kilo and jerk you would see in a CrossFit gym in the world from pretty much anyone outside professional CrossFitters. This is
Yeah.
exactly the technique that I would expect, and it's perfectly fine and functional. Could it be a lot better? Sure. Doesn't matter? Almost certainly not, unless he cares to make it that. I think he's just doing a little side quest in his 40s after retirement for 120.
Also, there's a lot to be said for a professional athlete. So he had an incredibly long career. If you don't know the context, he played professional soccer until he was 41 years old. He's now 44. There's a lot to be said for a professional athlete finishing their professional career still physically capable of training hard
Mhm.
and also having that mental drive to want to stay in good shape and push themselves here. Because I'm pretty sure he probably wasn't clean and jerking these numbers when he was playing. So that means he's actively training and actively still pushing towards a level of physical development he hasn't had before. And that is deeply admirable.
Yeah, a lot of elite athletes now who are who before probably would have just gotten fat and old and just started drinking a lot or something are definitely training a lot. I mean, we were looking at Johnny Wilkinson there, the famous ex English rugby player, and he's more yacked now than he was when he was playing professional rugby. And
Jacko Wilkinson.
there's a ton of people like that. So if you want help with your training and you do happen to be a soccer player or any kind of athlete, check out the Sika Strength app in the link below. This is one of the most well-supported apps in the world. We're on there. You're not just left to run a program by yourself. We're here to help you. Direct to coach chat, video feedback, access to all of the programs you can change through any at any time. You can run two at once if you want to, but you don't have to. Tons of programs on there, more being added later this year. Check it out in the link below and you will not regret it. People get stupendous results.